Welcome to this video lecture for the textbook Understanding Project Management, a Practical Guide, second edition. This is chapter 1, Understanding the Project Environment. So just a note on the PowerPoint slides, or in effect, these videos, is that these PowerPoint slides will be displayed on the videos for each chapter of the course that you're in from this textbook. These slides and videos will provide a high-level overview of the key concepts of project management. They're a summary of the textbook, but not a replacement. They do not cover each topic in as much detail as the textbook. And therefore, it is appropriate for your classes to do the appropriate readings before. The PowerPoint slides and this video and these videos are a supplement. It's a way of sort of summarizing the other readings that you have done. Now, throughout these videos, as well as the textbook, there's various symbols that are important for you. This symbol here is the next installment of an ongoing case study that runs through the textbook. This symbol is for important summary concepts and ideas. So anytime you see this symbol, it's a summary concept and idea. Key terminology is the following symbol, and so there'll be a summary of the key terminology within each chapter and each video. And then there's questions for further discussion and exploration. So there's various points where in the textbook and in the videos, there's open-ended questions that we should consider. So look for these symbols, both in the text and in the videos. Now, speaking of the textbook case study, which was referred to on the previous slide, there is a case study. And the course and the textbook and these videos will follow an ongoing case study from its initiation to completion as a way of demonstrating the key concepts of project management. So it's important to very much read and understand the case study in detail. It's fundamental. This project, it's an imaginary project, but typical of business projects, involves the product launch of a new mobile device app. So that's the project that's being used. During each week's lesson, the new concepts covered will be demonstrated in the case study. And the following is an introduction to the case study. So in your textbook, you're going to find this case study in chapter 1, and this video is in effect reading word for word the case study. So I'm just going to play it here, so we'll just listen along to the case study.
Deco Productions is a medium-sized software company located in the Midwest that employs over 300 people. Casey Seridor founded the company in 2012. As an avid photographer, Casey guides the company in the development of software related to photography and video production. The company name was inspired by Casey's interest in the Art Deco period. She was drawn to the streamlined forms and smooth lines inherent in the period and looks to instill this modern elegance into the culture and products of her company. The Art Deco period's focus on technological and social progress is also a high priority for Deco Productions. The company's goal is simple: to provide industry-leading quality products and services to its customers. This best-in-class strategy requires a culture of constant innovation with frequent product updates in order to stay ahead of the competition. Deco Productions promotes an open and collaborative environment. Work hours are flexible, and many employees spend time both in the office and working from home. The office has an open concept design with a few private rooms reserved for customer meetings and private conversations. Casey's philosophy is that people make better decisions when they have a stake in the outcomes of the organization. This is accomplished through an employee profit-sharing program. She also believes that the people closest to the work are best able to understand how the work should be performed. Employees and teams are empowered to modify their own processes in order to improve the company's performance. Virtual town hall meetings where Casey and her management team describe the company's recent progress and upcoming challenges are held on a monthly basis. Employees have the opportunity to ask questions and provide ideas. There are numerous instances of ideas raised during the meeting that were subsequently implemented to the benefit of the company. Deco Productions develops camera and video software for the following markets: consumers, camera manufacturers, and video camera manufacturers. One of Deco Productions' software products is DecoCam. DecoCam is an industry-leading software application for the mobile device market. Consumers are able to purchase and download the product to their mobile devices. The product employs state-of-the-art technology to produce digital pictures with superior color and clarity. A new version of DecoCam, version 4, has been proposed. This version would introduce a new feature known as the Photo Assistant. This feature would perform as follows. Before taking a picture, the user has the option of selecting the Photo Assistant. The user is prompted to take a short video of up to 10 seconds of the immediate surroundings. The Photo Assistant analyzes the video and recommends an optimal setting in terms of the direction, angle, and content of the picture. While the initial cost estimate to create this feature is high, it is expected that the Photo Assistant will be popular with consumers and help DecoCam maintain its position as a market leader. Though this initiative has not yet been approved, many in the organization are hopeful that the project will commence shortly.
Okay, so that is the introduction to the case study. And as mentioned previously, this will run throughout the entire course. So in each video, each week of the course, another segment or segments of the case study will be played. There's one more in today's video. So on to some foundational aspects of project management. And these are things that set us up, that enable us to continue through the various topics that we will be covering. So first of all, on the project environment, there's the definition. So we're going to be talking about the definitions of project and project management, something called the project life cycle, project stakeholders, project constraints, a key idea of projects, programs, and portfolios. So these are the things that we're going to be covering in more detail. So the first of those, what defines a project? So there are many characteristics of defining a project, but there are a couple of fundamental ones. One is that a project is temporary in that it starts and ends. It does not last forever. It's a bound period of time. Now that can be days, weeks, months, even years, but is still temporary. It starts and ends. The other is that it is unique, so that the outcome is unique. It produces something new or different. It's not producing a production line of things. It's producing unique outputs that come out at the end of a project. And so that's something to very much keep in mind. Now, key idea, a project is defined as a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. This is the definition provided by the Project Management Institute, or PMI. Now, how do projects differ from organizations? That's a good question. Well, we know that projects are temporary and unique. They are temporary in duration, and they produce unique outcomes or outputs. Operations are really the opposite. That's the other part of an organization. Organization consists kind of at the root, projects and operations. The operations area of the company is ongoing, is not temporary. Operations goes for really however long the company is in operation, is how long the operations take place. So is perpetual in duration. And the idea of operations is not to create unique things, but is to create identical things, is to create products that are the same as each other, a consistent service, application of service, and that's kind of thing. So you can really see that they're kind of opposite from each other in a way. Now, projects and operations are both very important areas of companies, and they share many business skills are needed to both be a project manager or an operations manager. But projects has some uniqueness in that because of that temporary and unique nature of the outcome. So key idea, operations is the area responsible for the ongoing creation of the goods and services of an organization. And it's important from a project management to understand the operations area because the output, the result of projects are normally transferred over to the operations area of the organization. So it's important that the project manager is aware of the operations area. Okay, let's talk about project management for a moment. Project management is a discipline that promotes an orderly progression from the start to the end of the project. It uses various processes and documents, which is the content of this course, and it is defined as the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements. And that's another PMI definition. So project management is what we will be covering throughout this course and through these series of videos. Okay, next topic, the project lifecycle, or PLC for short. This is something that is a key idea of many projects, is the idea that there is a cycle that it goes through, a process that projects follow. Now, let's step back for a moment. The process to create something new. So let's not think about project management for a moment, but let's just think about we want to create something new. Maybe it's in our personal life or that type of thing. What would we do? What is the process we should do? Well, step one, determine the overall parameters. Think about, well, when do I need to have this complete by? What are my overall objectives that I'd like to do? Is there a certain amount of budget or money that I can use to complete this? So there's overarching parameters. And so that's step one. That in the PLC is known as the initiating phase. Okay. Step two is once we know that, now we can start to think about, what is it that we should do and how should we do it? And what are the various options that we can do? And what will the output look like? Before we start creating it, let's draw a picture of it on paper or a schematic or let's write down what are the different characteristics that we want to do, because often there's lots and lots of options and so on. Now, this is all done within the overall parameters defined in step one. So this is step two, and this is known in the PLC as the planning phase, as where we're planning the work. We're not doing it yet, we're planning it. The next step is produce. Now, once we've planned it, once we know what we're going to do, or we have a good idea in step two, step three is to produce the product, service, or results. So to produce what it is, to physically create it. Now, that might be building something, might be constructing, it might be writing computer code, it might be designing something in a graphic software, but it's the actual production of the end result. This is known as the executing phase. And then finally, step four is the end of the project, where we're finished. We've created what we set out to create, hopefully successfully. And this is where we check the results against the original parameters. And this is known as the closing phase. A key idea, the project life cycle consists of the following four phases: initiating, planning, executing, and closing. These can have different names in different organizations. Sometimes they're renamed. Sometimes it's split into 5 phases instead of 4. But the basic idea is that we have these various stages that we go through following the generic project life cycle of initiating, planning, executing, and closing. Okay, so that's the project life cycle. On to the idea of project stakeholders. Now, we're going to talk about project stakeholders in much more detail in a future video. But we're just introducing the concept here. So for discussion, the idea is, well, what is a project stakeholder? What is a stakeholder anyways? And who are the potential project stakeholders for the average project? Who would be a stakeholder? Well, first of all, what is a project stakeholder? That's you may or may not have come across that term before. Well, key idea, project stakeholders are either individuals, groups, and they can be organizations that are involved in or impacted by a project. So it's anyone or any group or organization that has some kind of involvement or they are impacted by the project. So who would be potential stakeholders? Well, there are many. The project manager is a stakeholder. The people working on the project are stakeholders. The customer is a stakeholder. The regulatory bodies, government organizations that may be involved in approving work that is done are stakeholders. There can also be interest groups or even activist groups can be stakeholders because they are affected by, or they could affect the project as well. So there's various stakeholders that are involved in the understanding of who these stakeholders are and their management, which we will go into more detail in a future video, is extremely important. Now, a key stakeholder is the project sponsor. So we're just going to define this type of stakeholder in a little bit more detail. So a key stakeholder should be present or known on every project is the project sponsor. So for discussion, well, what is the role of the project sponsor? And what is the difference between the project sponsor and the customer? Is this the same role? So let's think about that for a moment. Well, the role of the project sponsor is a couple of things. Now, it's not the project manager. The project manager is the one who manages the project. The project sponsor is the one who provides the budget. Somebody, some person or organization, and it's usually represented by a person, is providing the funding to do this project. And we're talking about business projects where there is actual funds required. The project sponsor provides that. Now, there can be roles on a project, some of a project sponsor, and then there's the idea of the customer. And is this the same role? Well, this is the answer to this as in many cases. Because all projects are different, the answer is it depends. Sometimes the customer, the one who is receiving the results of the project, is also the project sponsor. For example, if we had a builder, a contractor who was building a house for someone, a custom house, well, in that case, the customer, who is the person who receives the house, would also be the project sponsor, would be providing the funds for that project. So in that case, the project sponsor and customer is the same person. In another project, the project sponsor and customer could be different. It could be two different groups or individuals. For example, if this was, if we were talking about, say, Apple, and they were creating a new version of the iPhone, well, there would be someone in the Apple company, an executive, probably a vice president or a director, who would provide the funds to the project team to be able to create that new version, which would be a project. So they would, from their budget within the Apple Corporation, would provide the funding. They're the project sponsor. Well, the customer, though, are the people that buy the iPhones, the end consumer. So in that case, the project sponsor and customer are two different entities. So it's important to understand the difference, and know that sometimes it's in the same person, sometimes it's different. So it's two different concepts. The other thing a project sponsor does, that in addition to providing the funding, also provides the overall direction for the project. Now, doesn't manage the day-to-day activities, but provides the overall direction on the overall objectives and sets the budget for it, and is the one who will indicate what the timeline. So big key things are done by the project sponsor. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, project constraints. Now, this is one of the key challenges of project management, is that there are, in effect, constraints or limitations on projects. You never seem to have enough time. You never seem to have enough budget. You always seem to need to do more than is required, and so on. Those are constraints. That's what makes it difficult. If you had unlimited time and money and could do with whatever you want, projects would be easy. There would be almost no need for project management because, well, you just do whatever you want to do in whatever time you want to do it, and whatever you produce is the end result. Well, that would be easy to do, but you can see the problems with that, is that organizations couldn't run that way. So we have this idea of project constraints. Well, in the early days of project management, there were 3 constraints that were identified. They're the primary 3, the original, and they're the things I just mentioned, by the way, of scope, time, and cost. Scope is what the project is supposed to do, the definition of its characteristics when you're complete. The time is the schedule. How soon do you have to, when do you have to have this done by? And the cost is the amount of budget that you have. How much money can you spend? Now, these are related to each other because you can see the way they'll start to sort of impact each other. For example, the more you want to do, the bigger the scope, the longer it's going to take and the more money you need. On the other hand, the faster you want to do something, the less you can do, and the more money it might cost because of the increase in overtime and the more people you would need and so on. So these things interrelate to each other. They pull at each other, which is why these original triple constraints were usually shown as a triangle. And it was often sometimes called the iron triangle. There's various names for it. Over time, there were additional constraints identified. So as project management matured, there was a realization, well, it's not just these 3 things, there's other things. For example, the quality, not just what we want to produce, but how well does it perform? That's another constraint, and it also is tied into the original 3. The higher the quality, the more time it may take, the more cost that it may take, or maybe you can't, if you want to produce something of utmost quality, you might not be able to do as much, which is the scope, right? So they're all tied in together. Then it was realized, well, resources are often a constraint. We can't necessarily get an unlimited number of people of every different type of skill, or the types of skills that we need at any one point in time. So often we're restrained or constrained by resource availability. And it's not just people availability, it may be computer resources or equipment resources. If we're working on a construction project, we might not be able to get that crane that we need to because there's a shortages of cranes at this point because of all the building that's being done. So that's an example of a resource constraint. And resource constraints are very common on projects. Finally, the 6th constraint is risk, is the amount of risk that the project is willing to take on can affect everything else. If projects that are willing to take higher risks can perhaps reduce the time required, can perhaps be able to lower the cost because they're willing to take some risks. As well, if you do reduce your quality, for example, it might increase the risks. If you don't have enough resources, it increases the risk. So risk is another constraint which is tied into all of the others. And it's really a lot of what a project manager does is manage these constraints, is to realize when you're trying to define solutions, you need to figure out what is the best combination of each of these constraints. How do you manage this, realizing that everything you do might affect these other constraints? And that's a key challenge of project management. This can be a little theoretical and a little bit hard to understand. Let's look at an actual example and we'll be able to work through this. So let's say, for example, you're working on a project. It can be any project with 5 team members. So it could be a construction project, an IT project, a marketing project, doesn't matter. So you have your 5 team members and you have a challenging amount of work to do, to complete. So you have a challenging amount of scope, right? So it's a lot to do. You have a budget to meet, which is the cost. So you know your budget. And so, you're saying, okay, I have this amount of work. I have this budget. We have a due date, which is the time constraint. We have the desired performance of the result of the product of the project, which is the quality. And we have the desire for few or no problems, which is the risk. So our project sponsor doesn't want a lot of risk. They're pretty risk averse. Now, you look at this and you say, okay, I've got my 5 team members. They're my resources. I'm constrained to 5 team members. And you look at these other things, the scope, the cost, the time, the quality, and the risk, and you go, okay, yep, I can do that. It's challenging, but doable, right? We're about to embark on the project. And then something happens. And this is real life projects. Things happen. So as the project is about to begin, your team is reduced by 1 team member. So you go from 5 to 4 team members. So our resources are reduced. So remember that diagram on the previous slide, the way all of the 6 relate to each other? Well, what is the effect on each of the other? What is the likely effect? And that's the key thing, likely effect on each of the other 5 constraints. For example, what is the effect on the scope, the time, the cost, the quality, and the risk? We're going to look at each one of these individually. Now, let's look at scope. Now, if you want to think about this one for a moment, just stop the video for a second, think about this. But you say, okay, if we're reduced by 1 team member, what would be the likely effect? Now, again, we would try our best. You'd try to have your 4 team members work as effectively as possible. And that is a given. But if we keep all of the other things frozen, now, when we're doing this, we're going to consider scope, but we're going to say, without increasing the cost, without delaying the project, without changing the quality or the risk, what would happen to scope? All things being equal, working as hard as we can. Okay, and the answer to that is there would be a tendency, not for sure. This isn't some kind of definite, absolute outcome, but there would be a decreasing effect on your scope. And when you think of it, it's kind of logical. If you have 4 people instead of 5, they're all working at top efficiency. You can't squeeze out any more efficiency out of them. Well, they're going to be able to do less in all other things being equal. Okay, so that's the relationship now of resources to scope. Reduced resources, reduced scope. Now, what about, let's sort of reset the deck here and say, okay, let's consider the time constraint. Now, in this case, we're not decreasing the scope anymore. We're saying, okay, we're reducing our resources from 5 to 4, but we want the same scope. We don't want to reduce it. The same budget. We can't make any change to the budget, the same quality, the same risk. What's going to be the likely effect on the time? Can we do it in less time or more time? Will the time decrease or increase? And the answer to that is increase. It's going to take us, all things being equal, more time because we only have 4 people, right? So the effect of the reduction of resources is an increase to our schedule. Now, again, we're doing this sort of scientifically of keeping each of the variables constant, but you can see the relationship. Okay, we'll do it again. We're going to say, okay, we'll reset the deck here. And we're going to say, okay, what's the effect on the budget? If we want the same scope, we don't want to decrease it. We don't want to increase the time. Same due date, same quality, same risk. What happens to our budget? what's going to be the pressure on our budget? Well, that's an increase because you only have 4 team members. And sometimes teams, people will struggle with this and say, well, why is that? Why would it cause increase? Well, because the answer is your 4 team members are going to have to work longer. They're going to have to work overtime, which in most organizations means extra money, time and a half, working weekends. You might have to bring more people in, and they tend to be less experienced. They may go through a learning curve, or you start to get inefficiencies when you start bringing people in. They start to they start to become less efficient, which increases the cost. So there's a cost increase implication. Okay, next up, we reset the deck and we say, well, what's the effect on quality? For example, if we keep the scope the same, we don't want to decrease the scope, we don't want to increase the time, we don't want to increase the cost, and we don't want to affect the risk, what'll happen to quality? Well, it could decrease. The team will start to cut corners. If you got 4 people doing it and they have to do the same amount, same time, same cost, their only option left really is to cut corners, to don't check their work, to do things really quickly, and quality goes down. It's more the fact, it's almost a fact of life on that one. And then finally, what's the effect on risk? Well, this one, by this point in time, this is starting to become apparent. There's an increase in risk. If you try to keep everything the same, you're taking a lot of risk, right? With that one less. So you can see the way these interrelate. And we could play this game by changing any one of the variables and then running it through any one of the constraints and running it through the other 5, and you'd be able to predict the impact. Now, I want to emphasize one more time, this is not an absolute for sure. Often there are breakthroughs and innovations, and sometimes when you are in a pinch, you suddenly, team members will think of really innovative ways of doing things, and can break and can not have the constraints come true like this. But on average, these relationships play out, and it's the job of the project manager to manage these and understand these pressures and help the project sponsor and the organization make appropriate decisions. Okay, so the key idea, the 6 project constraints are scope, time, cost, quality, resources, and risk. And it's important for project managers to understand that. Okay, another concept that is important is the one of programs. Now, in this course, we'll be primarily talking about projects, which we've defined what those are already. But there is this other concept and other structures. There's other structures and organizations related to project management. One of them is the concept of a program. There are many instances where a number of projects share a common business objective, and they're grouped together. So there's a number of projects that are all working simultaneously to the same business objectives. And so they're grouped together to become a program. And they are managed by a program manager, which is kind of a senior project manager. Many project managers aspire to and eventually in their career can be promoted to and become program managers. So think of a program manager as sort of a senior or super project manager, in that they're then managing all of the other project managers who each have their individual projects. So programs allow for the coordinating of decisions because each of the projects are working towards a common business objectives. They often need to align decisions and timing and so on. And so that's accomplished through the program and program managers. They may need to coordinate schedules. They may also need to coordinate resources. They often share resources in some ways, in many ways. As I mentioned, programs are led by a program manager who directs the project manager of each project within the program. So programs, again, in summary, key idea, are groups of projects that are related in some way, such as a common business objective. So they're put together for a reason, and usually it's because they're being put together for some business objective to complete that is common. Okay, there's another concept called portfolios. These are different from programs. A portfolio is the following. Now, organizations, really any organization, but particularly large organizations, there's often a large number of potential projects that may be performed. There's all kinds of things that can be done, but the organizations are limited in their resources and in their funds to do everything. You can't do everything. No company can afford to do everything. Even Google or Apple or, large organizations can't do everything. So it's important then for a number of the projects are selected in order to achieve the company's strategic objectives. So depending on what the company wants to do over the next, quarter, the next year, the next 5 years, projects are selected in order to achieve that. The collection of projects is called a project portfolio. So the different projects that are selected to be worked on in an organization is a project portfolio. The process of managing the portfolio is portfolio management and is performed by a portfolio manager. So, key idea, portfolios are the project initiatives selected by an organization to perform in order to achieve the strategic objectives of the organization. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, we're now going to see the second video that is part of this chapter, which now continues on our story. Remember, we were introduced to DecoCam. And so now what we're going to see is now what's going to happen at the very start of the project in the area of programs and portfolios. So let's see this part of the case study.
Casey Seridor signs into the video meeting. It is 8:55 a.m. and almost time for the monthly senior management strategy meeting to begin. Casey's senior management team, the heads of each division within Deco Productions, attend the meeting. After a review of the company strategy and a discussion of Casey's recent interview on a cable business news special, the agenda turns to the selection of the next major company initiative. There are 3 possibilities. 1, an update to Deco Productions' suite of video camera software that has been recently requested by one of Deco Productions' key customers. 2, the creation of a completely new service that would allow DecoCam customers to upload pictures to a system that would automatically create physical books, such as yearbooks or vacation albums. 3, an update to the DecoCam application that would introduce the Photo Assistant feature. Each initiative is presented by a different executive who outlines both the strategic benefits and the likely costs to be incurred. Jackson Woodhouse, Vice President, Customer Support, presents the first option. Most of the discussion revolves around the strategic importance of the customer and the likelihood that they would be lost to one of Deco Productions' competitors if the project is not completed. Catherine Bianche, Vice President, Product Development, presents the second option. Concerns are raised that other companies already provide the proposed functionality and that it doesn't differentiate Deco Productions in any significant way. Arun Singh, Vice President, Mobile Products Distribution, presents the third option. The possible development of the Photo Assistant feature generates a great deal of discussion. While the feature is bold and unique, the costs are also projected to be high. If the project fails, it would cause a significant hit to the company's bottom line. After a period of discussion, the decision becomes clear. Casey summarizes the discussion by confirming that the DecoCam version 4 project containing the Photo Assistant application will be starting soon. As part of the discussion, a goal for DecoCam version 4 is defined, a 5% increase in the mobile camera software market share. The executive team then shifts its focus to how best to organize this initiative. After a further period of discussion, the DecoCam version 4 program is created, consisting of the following projects: DecoCam version 4 development, DecoCam version 4 installation, DecoCam version 4 technical writing, and DecoCam version 4 product launch. Each member of the management team considers how this new program impacts their area of responsibility. Arun Singh looks at the list of projects. The DecoCam version 4 product launch project will be performed within his department. He makes a mental note to get a project manager assigned to this project as soon as possible.
Okay, so just let's a little debrief of what we were covering there. So during portfolio management, Deco Productions senior managers consider the following: an update to the company's video software, an update to create photo books, and an update to the DecoCam Photo Assistant. And the Photo Assistant option is selected. A program is created consisting of the following 4 projects. So this is an example of, you can see portfolio management underway and then a program results. This course will follow the product launch projects, the one in bold there. So for the remainder of the course and the videos, we'll be focusing on that specific project, but know or realize that the other 3 projects are also going on within the program. Here's the key terminology that was covered within this chapter and video, and see the key terminology section in chapter 1 of the textbook for the complete list of key terms. Some of the references within these slides, and this is the end of the video.